Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. This is Joe with the LSA, and I'd like to welcome all of you to our webinar series. Today's webinar is titled Enhanced Content, the Local Search Data Gap, and will be brought to you by our guest presenters Michael from Go Local Interactive and Joe from Infogroup. So with that, let's get started. Over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks for everyone else on the line today. Very excited to cover a lot of great content specifically related to local listings management and the enhanced content that users are seeking oftentimes online, but maybe not necessarily finding. So we're going to review the data that we found in an analysis we've done of several top industries, and also review a little bit of best practices, both from Go Local's perspective, from the agency side of things, and then also from Joe's perspective at Infogroup from the data aggregator side of it. So wanting to make sure everyone has a clear understanding of best practices at the end of the webinar. Just to give a little background on who we are before we dive in, Go Local, we're a leading provider of local search marketing for national regional brands. And listing management is definitely a foundation to developing a great online presence. But those brands that have a lot of locations continue to have this challenge of making sure that information is accurate online. And so what we've done is developed a solution to help them with that called Local Perceptions. It helps make sure that the information is accurate and robust online. And part of that solution actually includes a long-standing partnership with Infogroup to help make sure our clients are achieving their goals. So Joe, I wanted to give you a little bit of time here to talk about Infogroup and what you guys do.
You bet. So this is Joe Leger. Again, I've been at Infogroup for 15 years, and Infogroup is the leading provider of marketing and also publishing data to search, navigation, and mobile. And we've made a lot of enhancements over the last 6 years to, get a lot more enhanced content out to our publishers with a new platform that we've installed as of 2 years ago. So we're really excited about the topic today.
Yeah, and I wanted to point one other thing out too. If you guys want to continue the conversation either during or even after the webinar, you can use the hashtag local data gap, and we've got the Twitter handles there for Go Local and Infogroup. So definitely feel free to put some things there, and we'll respond via Twitter also. With that being said, let's jump in here. And the first area we wanted to cover was local search behavior. I mean, really, why is local search important? Why are we all here? Why are we having a webinar today on the topic? And the reason is because people are searching for local business information everywhere, on every device, and at every point in their purchase process. So we know, regardless of whether it's laptop, a mobile device, or a tablet, that a majority of people are searching with local intent. And what I mean by that is they want to interact with a business that's local to them. And data really shows that about when you're talking smartphone users, about 72% are looking to partner with a business within 5 miles, and laptop tablet users, about 66% expect and are searching for a business within 5 miles of where they're located. So that local intent is really important, and that's why local search and even local listings management is such an important topic. A couple other points on here. Consumers in most cases are considering more than one business. So this is a competition for businesses and brands. They're competing with the guys down the street for customers, so it's important that they have a firm understanding of what they need to do at a local level in order to increase their customer base. Today's topic is also specifically talking about enhanced content, so that goes beyond just name, address, and phone number. So why is that information important? And a study done by Google noted 11 different types of information just from that one study alone that consumers are searching for when they're trying to find a local business. That would be things like hours of operation. They're seeking photos, maybe it's payment options, promotions or deals, driving directions, or even what traffic looks like to get to the location. So, the old days of having just name, address, and phone number online are over. We really need to get into that enhanced content, giving them the information they need to ultimately make a purchase decision. And that's the other point on this slide is really people in the that are performing local searches are ready to act, with 50% of smartphone users visiting a location within a day, so a day of conducting a local search. So these people are very likely to convert. They're very low on the funnel, and they're consumers that people want to be found in front of. So that's why we're here today. Joe, anything you wanted to add here?
No, I think that's, you pretty much summed it up. I mean, consumers are getting smarter, and therefore the businesses have to be smarter. And, you know, a lot of the brands are, it's really, you know, getting to the SMBs to let them know the value of adding this enhanced content. You know, a lot of the SMBs, as we'll talk about later, don't even have websites. And so, you know, without a website, without pushing forward your hours of operations, your credit cards accepted, you have Wi-Fi, you know, all these different fields that you have for enhanced content, they would be missing out on.
Agreed. So from a challenges standpoint, what makes local listings management challenging? What are some of the hurdles? And we've got them here on the slide. It comes down to accuracy, and I know from an agency standpoint, that's one of the #1 things that come up with the brands that we talk about is, you know, the frustration with maybe inaccuracies that are appearing online and how to correct that. But then the second most important that we're hearing at Go Local is the time and resources element. Businesses just don't really know the process to get this corrected necessarily, especially when you're talking about an SMB, and so it becomes a drain on their resources. And you know, it's not exactly like they're teaching this stuff in a college course, so it's no wonder that they're not necessarily aware of the process, and that's where somebody like Go Local steps in and helps out. But the accuracy piece is so important, because most of us on the line have probably been through that experience of, you know, looking up a location, whether it's a restaurant, a grocery store, or even a gas station, and you go to drive to that location or contact it, and either the phone number is disconnected, or you drive to the location itself and it's no longer there, or it's closed. So it's just a frustrating experience for a customer, and so it's definitely a need that businesses are looking to address. From a speed and distribution standpoint, Joe, hoping you can add some commentary here on, you know, what you guys are doing from an aggregator standpoint to help, you know, make sure that that listing information is getting distributed out to everywhere consumers are searching in a timely manner as well.
You bet. Well, first it starts with technology. As I mentioned, we acquired a company called GoTime about 3 years ago, and before that we had a legacy system where the publishers our licensees were taking, you know, monthly updates, and by the time they got the data, it would be 60 to 90 days before they were listed, just like 3 or 4 years ago. Since switching to the Axle platform, they're now getting updates within 30 days, to where you're seeing them in maybe 45 from the time you submitted it, to 5 publishers taking daily updates, to where you see it anywhere from within 48 hours up to 7 business days. It depends on the publisher. So that's how we're trying to speed things up. We've given the publishers the ability to take timely data if they can take it. But believe it or not all publishers want to work with ingesting data on a daily basis. They're working with hundreds of millions of metadata. It makes it kind of tough. But I think the message that we're sending is, you know, you don't have to take the whole file. You can just take the deltas of the changes that happen on an ongoing basis. And so, again, we've got 5 publishers on board, and we hope to have more. As far as the accuracy and the speed, Infogroup is, I think, one of the only companies where we'll make at least 3 attempts to verify the listings in our database. And so, you know, some people, you know, call it, you know, you're creating friction, but really, the publishers appreciate it, because they don't want the friction. They want to make sure that they're getting a consistent and accurate depiction of the company name, address, and phone. And so what you don't want is Joe's Pizza, and then in another advertisement I put Joe's Pizza Hollywood. In one ad I put my home address or my work address, and in the other ad I put my mobile address. This can cause confusion to the publishers if they're getting both those listings. You're going to have dupes in the system. So what Infogroup will do is they'll look at all the resources that are coming in, and then the records that come through you, Michael, for example, in Go Local, and we'll have the right message for that listing, and we'll try to remove the dupes through the other publisher sites by sending that record, the Joe's Pizza Hollywood with my mobile number, as a bad record, as a delete.
Right, and the other comment I wanted to make as it related to limited content is the data is only good as you use it. And so, I know that you guys are really good about having a lot of opportunity to provide enhanced content, but if businesses are failing to use those data fields, it doesn't help the online presence. And so that's where, again, Go Local steps in, and it's really on us to work with those brands to understand the enhanced content that should be provided, and making sure that that's happening. So a lot of them aren't aware that there is enhanced content to provide in the first place, and so that education piece is really important.
Well, from an enhanced content, I mean, if you're not getting hours of operations, then, like you said, consumers are getting savvy. They're looking at multiple businesses. If one business pops up for a brand that they're looking for, and it's got hours and the other one doesn't, well, I don't know, if I'm a user or a consumer, I'm going to go to the one that has hours because I know they're open. Or what credit cards are accepted? Do they have Wi-Fi? Are they handicap friendly? I mean, all these things that a business should be considering to be relevant.
Right, and it's no longer, I mean, it's a consumer expectation, to your point. I'm not, even from my own personal experience, if I don't see that for the business that I'm currently looking at, it's not as though I'll call them and ask them their hours. I'm moving my search on to the next one, and that's a lost opportunity for that business. So ultimately, this is meaning, lost customers, lost traffic, so that's why this stuff is so important.
Well, then also, that a lot of publishers, before you go on to the next slide, they're putting openings and closed next to their listings. And so if you don't have hours of operations, you could be listed as closed, and you're really open.
Right, and we'll have examples of that too later, kind of the good versus bad, which I think will be really helpful for people to understand what an enhanced listing looks like and maybe what a not so good enhanced listing looks like. So as we move into enhanced content, we touched on this a little bit, but the real reason we need to provide this, to your point, Joe, is people are getting savvy, and it's also a much more competitive environment. So you need to stand out, and you do that by including a lot of that enhanced content, things like photos, describing your payment options, your hours, the services you provide. In addition to not only standing out, you're providing your users with a better online experience. And I touched on this before, it's not as though they're going to stop and then request the information from you. So if you're not providing them the information they need, they're just going to move on, and that's a lost opportunity. So user experience is really important there. Improved ranking comes from the consistency of your data and making sure it's consistent throughout the internet. Ultimately, the publishers are trying to, as you alluded to earlier, Joe, that they're pulling all of this data in, and we want to eliminate duplicates and inaccuracies and tracking numbers. So getting that data consistent and accurate is ultimately going to benefit you in terms of rankings with your SEO efforts. And the final point on this slide that I wanted to touch on is, we know from the data that people are looking at more than one business. I mean, you go to a Yelp or you go to a Google and you search, let's say you're searching storage in Chicago, you're going to get a set of local results, all of which are fairly close to you. So you have to provide that content that's ultimately going to influence that customer choice, and making sure of the brands they're considering that you're the one that they select. And I think, again, when we go through the examples here in a few slides, you'll see some vast differences on a good page and a bad page, and why that would impact someone's purchasing decision. So the next piece that we're going to cover is some actual data we did. We looked at 10 industries and looked at the amount of data that they were providing online to their consumers. So we looked at a million plus locations, looked at 100 plus data fields, and giving those businesses a ranking score, 1 being poor, 10 being really good, to determine the types of content they're providing, but also as a ranking system to compare how they look against other industries. And so while we don't have time to cover all 10 today, we will be covering restaurants, hotels, banks, as well as auto repair, just to show you what those industries look like and where there's areas of opportunity when it comes to enhanced content, and then ultimately what that means in terms of opportunities for businesses in those industries or even outside of those industries. So The first industry we're looking at is restaurants, and I chose this one, A, because I love food, and I love to eat, but B, because I think we've all been through this process of looking and comparing restaurants online, and I know specifically for me, it seems that my wife and I make this one of the more difficult tasks of a weekend, which is coming to a consensus on a restaurant, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that. So, but the data that's provided ultimately helps that decision. So think about the factors that matter to you. What information are you seeking when you're the actual consumer? For example, a restaurant might be located downtown, you've got maybe a show going on, and you're worried about parking. Well, you're going to want to know whether or not that business is providing valet parking. And you can see from the results that that was an area that we were not seeing information being provided by a majority of businesses. On the scale of 1 to 10, it's actually less than a 1. Might as well be a 0. I know at workplaces, people look at things like maybe grabbing some appetizers, so a happy hour menu might be really important. And then I know for myself personally, too, I want to see the restaurant. So including some form of primary image. What does this restaurant look like? What's the decor? Gives you an understanding of the type of ambiance you're going to have there, and things like dress code and price range going to help you understand what type of restaurant you need to dress for too. And so not having that information online just means you're not part of the conversation necessarily. Joe, I know restaurants for you guys is one area where you're focusing on enhanced content. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of that and why you guys added in some of those enhanced content fields specifically for restaurants?
You bet. So we're serving all the markets out there. Your New Yorks, your Chicagos, places where they have high-end restaurants, but they also have limited parking. And then you've got the other areas, like in LA or Hollywood, where they might have high-end food, but they have valet parking. So they're also limited there, even though there's a lot of parking lots there. So it's good to know: does a restaurant have valet parking? Is it handicap friendly? I mean, the generation, is getting older, but they have money to spend, and most of the older generation loves to eat food. So what they're going to do is they're going to look at your website, first of all, and if you notice, you got a 5.0 on that out of 10. That should be 10.0 for addresses. Then you have your hours. A lot of restaurants have multiple openings and closings. I know a lot of them around my area here in Omaha, Nebraska do, and so you have 3.9 populated for hours, and so it goes on and on. Website, everybody's got a mobile phone. And so, they're going to be checking, first of all, for the restaurant, and secondly, when they're in the restaurant, they're probably going to look to see where they can go to for dessert, if not at that restaurant, or drinks, or whatever the case may be. And, they'd love to know that they're not using their data package. So a lot of different things, it fits different people's skill set as far as what they're looking for. And that's why you feel the enhanced content. And so for the publishers, we can't dictate what the publishers use, whether it's coming from the aggregator or if the publisher is getting it from a Yelp or someone else. But what you can control is populating that field or not. Because if you populate it and you push it out there and it's consistent, then it's there for the publishers to use. Whereas if you're not populating it and the publishers decide to use that information, well, guess what? It's not there.
Right, and they may even start to make decisions on how to list you based on the content you provide if they deem it's important enough. And hours is probably a really good example of that. Like if you fail to list hours, you may not get listed, perhaps. So the more that this enhanced content is available and the more the publishers start adopting it, the more likely they're going to almost start to enforce or try in some way, shape, or form to give benefit to those that are obviously using that information. I agree. I mean, looking at restaurants in particular, these are some of the most important things that would be considered, and to see how low that industry was really indicates to me that they're a little bit behind in terms of their local listings management. So definitely in need of some work there from an enhanced content standpoint. So let's take a look then at what does good and bad in a restaurant look like. Let's take a look at two different examples here. So there you have it. On the left-hand side is a good example. It's actually Providence New American Restaurant in Kansas City. Anybody been there? You'll see, probably not, but you'll see a lot of the examples in here from either Kansas City or from, that's where Go Local's headquartered. And then Joe, hold me on, or keep me honest here, is it Papillion? Am I saying that correctly? I should know that. We were just out at the user conference there, but you'll see a lot of the examples pulled from those two cities because that's where we're headquartered. So you see the example on the left-hand side, and if you had the choice of picking between these two restaurants, I think it becomes pretty obvious of which one's providing you the information that you need. The one on the left, it's got hours of operation. It talks about whether or not they do takeout. It talks about the dress attire and the ambiance, whether or not they have Wi-Fi. Is it good for kids? That might be a consideration, especially if you've got some young ones and you're not sure if it's a good fit. Do they do delivery? Do they even take reservations? So, I mentioned this earlier, but I don't really, when it comes to interacting with a restaurant, I don't really do anything over the phone right now. I don't even make my reservations over the phone. I can handle all of that online. And so again, when you fail to provide this information and I can't find it online, I'm just going to bypass you and go to a restaurant that does, like the example on the left. And so, it becomes very clear when you look at the two examples here of which one is providing the better customer experience and which one ultimately is probably going to drive, more customers.
And the point here to make, Michael, is if you're looking at these two examples, you don't have to be a high-end business to make an impact on the consumer. I mean, you could have had Red Barn with all those photos and enhanced content, and it would have looked just as sharp as the Providence New American Kitchen. So, it's a way to have you stand out. And a lot of people look for that professionalism.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the next couple examples, too, we'll talk about the impact because we know the type of traffic going to some of these pages and knowing that there's a lot of missed opportunity there, and we'll cover that here shortly. So moving into then hotels. Hotels is another one that I thought was pretty relevant to most people on the phone if you're doing any traveling and, maybe what factors go into that when selecting a hotel. So, how important is the look and quality of the room? You're probably going to want to see photos for something like that. Is there, for example, exercise facility or equipment available? I have a colleague that insists on exercising no matter where he's at, no matter where he's traveling, and so that's a key factor in his decision making. Internet is another one. Is there free internet available? And you see that here ranking in at about a 5. That's a huge consideration, especially for business travelers. One, I need to know that you have it because nothing is more frustrating, I think, when you're trying to get some work done and there's no Wi-Fi access at the hotel, but you can also indicate whether that is just simply internet access or whether that is free internet, which may make a decision a factor in someone's decision to stay there. So taking a look at the services here, room service, valet parking, whether or not there's a pool, pet friendliness, exercise facility, all of these coming in at around a 5 out of 10. And what was most shocking, I think, to me here, Joe, was the fact that many of the hotels are not providing a primary image, with that coming in at a 2 out of 10. So while the hours and web address are better than restaurants, they still seem to be very middle of the road and have a lot of opportunity for improving the experience online. And we'll look at a couple of those examples here in a second. Anything to add, Joe?
Definitely. I mean, I'm glad to see these enhancements out there. We carry over 146 fields, so you can even go to, is it kid friendly? Is it an indoor-outdoor pool? So think of yourself as a user. I mean, wouldn't you love to, when you're looking for a hotel, to make sure that it's got the amenities that you're looking for? And that's what we've tried to do. And again, it's acquiring the information, and what the publishers made loud and clear. You mentioned our user conference last year, not only for our SEO resellers, but also for the publishers that came into town, is linkage. It's linking this information up. It's one thing for someone to have a lot of enhanced content, but if you don't have a good company name, address, phone to help these publishers link it up, then it's gonna fall by the wayside. They're not going to be able to match it up. They're not going to be able to use that enhanced content. So again, number one, it's important to add this enhanced content, but number two, it's more important to make sure that you got a consistent message out there so that these guys can first of all match you up and then add this enhanced content.
Absolutely. So we're back to good versus bad, and we've got the example on the left, and I think it's pretty clear from the moment you see and compare the two that the visual elements on the left make a huge difference. And the nice thing about these profiles is we knew how many times they were viewed. So the example on the left-hand side has been viewed over 1.8 million times. So you start to think about the impact and what it means from a numbers standpoint for that business. Imagine if they didn't have any content out there with a page that's been viewed 1.8 million times. And that's kind of what you see on the right-hand side for the Holiday Inn Express there. It's been viewed 69,000 times, and there's not a single visual of what the room might look like. And you start to do the numbers in your head and think, what if they had added photos? If that had had even an impact on 10% of those views, that's 6,900 people that might have ultimately become customers that didn't. So not providing those photos, missing a lot of the helpful details or a detailed business description, just plain and simply equates to a bad experience, lost customers. And so again, good versus bad becomes pretty obvious to a user on which of these two that you would ultimately select. So the third example we wanted to cover today was banks, and I know particularly for banks, one thing that always comes up is the tricky business hours that they have, in particularly on weekends. If anyone's been there, I know I have, where I've tried to rush and make it to the bank before noon, thinking they closed at noon, and you only find out that they closed an hour earlier at 11 a.m. It's almost similar to trying to know when McDonald's breakfast hours ends. But the thing that we're seeing now with publishers, particularly when it comes to hours of operation, is if anyone's been on their Google phone or Google Maps on their smartphone and typed in a search for a location and ultimately looked for driving directions, Google's now telling you whether or not that business will be open or closed, based on the hours that are submitted. And so, making sure not only that there are hours there, and in this case, banks, it's again more of a middle of the road, a 5 score out of 10. But having those hours of operations are going to be really important, because publishers like Google and even YP.com, which we'll show here in a second, use that information to give you an indication of whether you should be traveling to that business or not. And I know, Joe, we've talked about too, as publishers continue to adapt this data, that may ultimately be a significant ranking factor that hurts you. You may not show up if you don't have hours of operation. So when we break down banks specifically, web address comes in at almost an 8, hours are about a 5. The other thing I really wanted to call out, Joe, was the last columns, actually the last 2 columns there, ATM and then host business. So when I talk about host business, this actually came up in a conversation with a bank today, is what happens when the location is located within a target, for example? There are best practices in how you manage that listing, and I know we'll get into the naming convention in a little bit here, Joe, but putting in parentheses in target is definitely not the right approach, and there's this data field called host business that allows you to indicate if that branch or location is actually inside of another business. And the other thing is ATMs. And listing those online. I had this happen the other day where I needed to get money to pay for my softball season, and I was trying to find an ATM by the field, and while I knew there was plenty around, nothing was coming up from a local listing standpoint on my Google Maps app. So Joe, from your standpoint with banks, can you talk a little bit about the ability to even list something like ATMs and maybe how that works, or could it provide a better experience?
Sure. So about 5 years ago, we added some specific coding for ATMs and specific codings for kiosks. And so we have the ability to list ATMs no matter where they're at. They can even be within the same bank, because a lot of the banks, Bank of America, will have an ATM next to it. We can also list companies like Rug Doctor or Blue Rhino or Redbox. You think of these standalone businesses within another business, or Sunglass Hut within a mall, things of that nature. So we do have the coding. We have a site number that links to our unique ID. So we do have coding for this, and one of the things that the publishers made loud and clear last week was, we need better linkages. We need better linkage on a business within a business, even beyond, the site number that we have that links up to unique ID. And so that's something that we're going to work on, with a couple of publishers stepping forward to kind of test this out to improve linkage not only for business within a business, but ATMs, but also brands. So you've got Harley-Davidson out there that has about 200 locations, brick and mortar, but they're in about 1,000 other locations. Wouldn't it be great to link that up and to serve that up in search? And so linkage is definitely on the minds of everybody. I mean, we can even talk about hospitals, which we're not talking about today. But it's very important to name that host business. So a lot of banks are within Walmarts or grocery stores. It would be great to know that, okay, I can't see the bank, but I see the Walmart. Okay, my bank is inside of that Walmart, especially if you're from out of town. Or you have a bank that's at a mall. We have what we call a landmark address. And so it would be great to know that the bank, my bank, in this area is within that mall. So now I know to go to that mall even though I can't see the sign for maybe my bank. So it's really important to use these fields, and I don't think a lot of people realize the importance of that, especially in navigation and mobile. It's just that visual of being able to see something gives people comfort.
Right, and I think it's clear even after covering these three examples about how enhanced content can differ by the industry. So, the enhanced content that you're looking or would be useful for restaurants is probably different than it is for hotels, and then it's also different than, again, for banks. So, it's really important to think about the industry that potential clients that you might be dealing with are in, or even if you are a business owner, what data is important to my consumers, and chances are there's an ability to feature that information online through your local listings management program. You're just failing to provide that content at this time, and that's just leading to it's either lost opportunity or you're giving the edge to a competitor down the street. So
what we also see that's going on, Michael, is that you look at the services as at 2.2. We see a lot of companies trying to be creative in putting these services in the company name, and it creates a lot of havoc for not only the aggregators but also the publishers, because that's going to create dupes. And really where those, like for example in banks, do they have home loans, auto loans, VA loans, do they do notary, do they do wills? That's where it would go, is in services. Our publishers are well versed in our fields and what is within them, and that's where you really want that content. And that would also eliminate confusion.
Right, and we've even had the instances where there's separate locations for some of those financial related services. They may have locations that of a portfolio of 1,000 locations, maybe only 200 of them offer mortgages or home loans, or they may even be physically different locations. We have mortgage locations, that's all they do, they're not a branch. We have actual branches that do everything else but not mortgages, and then we have a group of ATMs. And so keeping that information straight and making sure that that experience is very user-friendly, and you do that by providing the data like you just mentioned, Joe, in the services section is really important. So,
one thing to note on banks for your list. Yep. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
One thing to note on banks for some of your clients or whoever's listening is we do have the ability to list professionals as well. And so you could have, for banks, you could have financial advisors. And so, we have a unique ID for it. It's linked to that bank, and so it's basically sending a message to the publishers that this isn't a duplicate. Joe Lejeune is actually a financial advisor for Bank of America. And so again, it goes back to that linkage. And then you would also be able to use all that enhanced content for Joe Lejeune, who's the financial advisor, who might have different hours of operations than the bank. And so again, there's just another level of information that you could put on an individual within that location.
Right, and we'll talk too in the best practices section, but when they try to go about it themselves in the wrong way, and we'll show this, whether it's putting, like you said, some of those keywords into the naming convention, like the business title, they're actually creating their own problem that they're trying to solve by creating these inconsistent listings and these duplicate listings. So while their intentions may be good, and they usually are, I want them to know where we're located within a target, for example. The intentions may be good, but they don't truly understand the impact it has and the problem it's creating, and the duplicate listings and issues that arise from going about it in that way. So, sometimes they're their own worst enemy. So here's a couple of banking visual examples. And so, again, this one I think in particular is from yp.com. And so a lot of people have asked us too, as we kind of talk about distribution and getting your listing information out to as many sources as possible. Something like a yp.com will come up, and people are wondering about usage of that site. Well, just to give you an idea, this profile page on the left that has all of the content has been viewed over 200,000 times. So there's a lot of people viewing that profile page that probably ultimately visited the location based on the depth of information provided. The other thing you'll see is people may not originally intend to go to a site, maybe like a yp.com or even a Yelp, but when you go to Google and you do your searches for, in this case, banks in Omaha or banks in Austin, you're going to get the yp.coms of the world and the Yelps that are going to rank well because they are very and have very deep lists of these types of businesses that you're searching for. It's a really great directory and comparison tool to see what's all in the area. So very important that while Google is definitely one of the largest sites you need to be paying attention to, that even sites like a yp.com in this case are driving over 200,000 views to the profile on the left. So once again, kind of to your point, Joe, there's a very detailed built-out services section here in this example on the left, whereas on the right-hand side, you really don't know what they offer, if they do provide personal loans, money markets, any of those sorts of things, or even if they do business banking. So, it becomes, again, very clear from a visual standpoint when the choice is given to consumers in these two instances, which way a majority of them are going to go. And then we know the volume, the sheer volume of people that are going to these listings, hundreds of thousands. So it's definitely impactful and definitely would be in the best interest of the business to take the time and go ahead and provide all of this detail. Mm-hmm. So the last example I wanted to cover today in the hour that we have here is auto repair, and this was actually one of the industries that we found in our analysis that had some of the most robust presence, provided the most enhanced content. And I think, Joe and I were speculating as to why that might be. And, a lot of times auto repair, it might be a smaller business, maybe a single owner, doesn't have a lot of locations. So one, it's a lot less to keep track of from a listings management standpoint. They've got their one location, so it could be a little bit easier to manage. They also need to compete where they can for leads, and they know that, Joe, you mentioned this earlier, that local listings are a way for these guys to compete. It's a free resource for them to go in and update and provide this information, and so they understand probably a little bit more than maybe 1,000 location business that this is the ultimate driver of their sales. They need to take the time to go in and fill this information out. So when we look at auto repair in particular, the numbers across the board for website address, hours of operation, payments, even a logo is important. If you think about it, in a lot of cases, if it's auto repair, you may not have a defined mechanic you go to, or you may be stranded on the side of the road, and so that logo is going to be important to be a visual representation that you've arrived at the location if you're trying to find it. Business description, also very important. What are you guys about? Are you only mufflers? Are you full service auto repair? Do you only do paint jobs? Knowing that business provides specific services and a business description is going to be really important. And then even something like professional associations. I think that's ultimately just a trust symbol. You want to make sure you're working with somebody that knows what they're doing. And so even if listing out your professional associations gives you an edge over the competition, it's important that you do that. I think, the one place that we saw from an auto repair standpoint that we didn't see a lot of content was showcasing a primary image. So maybe it's because it's not as important in this industry, but I think anytime you can provide that visual, show a clean, very well-maintained auto repair shop would go a long way in helping drive consumers. So Joe, anything to add when it comes to auto repair, and maybe why we saw these numbers the way that they shook out here, with it being one of the top industries in terms of providing enhanced content?
It's interesting, and I checked some numbers on our marketing side. These guys are savvy. I wish all industries, took advantage of the marketing as these guys do. I mean, they do a lot of marketing. It's very competitive in the auto industry, and so a lot of these guys want to make sure that they have the right information there, because they understand that if somebody's looking for to fix their car, it's maybe one time out of 3 months or 4 months that they might need the service, and they want to make sure that that person has enough information to stand out over the next person. And so this is really where I see one industry that is just like, okay, I'm going to swing for the fences. I've only got one shot at this user, this consumer, and I want to make sure that I stand out.
And here's an example of that, exactly on the left-hand side. I mean, this profile, just to give you an idea, for auto repair on the left-hand side was viewed over 1.4 million times. And this particular business has gone the route of not only including all of the elements we just had on the previous slide, but they also did a video. They did a YP360 virtual tour. So, the enhanced content fields will probably even continue to maybe even grow and expand with allowing things like virtual tours and things to be featured on the listing. The couple things I really wanted to note on the listing on the left is it mentions cash only. So I don't know if you can see that here under payment method, but that is something you absolutely want to list in your profile if you're a business. The last thing you want is somebody running, showing up to your business and they've only got credit cards. And so if you are cash only, it's really important, and they've taken the time to go ahead and do that. The other thing is, if you note the hours of operation, it's 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., so they close in, pretty early on a Saturday. So, if you didn't have this information, what if you broke down, 3 or 4 blocks away and you had this auto repair place and one other that are close, and you ultimately select this one and they don't have their hours on there, and you arrive at 1 p.m. and the business is closed. You've gone through all that work, you're in a tough spot, and you're not very happy with that business, and the likelihood of you going back is probably not very good. So they've gone a long way on the left-hand side to providing that information, and I think, again, when you're looking at the two on the left versus the right, I know where I'm taking my car if I need some auto repair work done. It's definitely going to be the one on the left. So great opportunity for improvement for the one on the right. Left-hand side is definitely more of the norm, it seems, based on the data we had on the previous slide of just providing a ton of great content for users that are looking for auto repair in their markets. So that's the industries at a high level that we wanted to cover today, and I know we've got about 10, maybe 15 minutes before we take some questions here. So we wanted to cover listing management best practices. So we know that people are performing local search. We know that there are challenges along the way, keeping that information accurate and consistent. We've kind of covered the importance of enhanced content, why you need it, what it looks like visually, and also by industry, so who's doing a good job and maybe who's not. But now that we know all this, what is the right approach to managing your listings? And I think, Go Local, the foundation of all our programs, Joe, is to use the data aggregators like Infogroup to make sure all of that data, all of that listing information and enhanced content is reaching all of those online and mobile and navigation sources that consumers are using. So wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about how data feeds through an Infogroup can help improve on some of these issues that we've seen in the previous slides.
So best practices, again, in Infogroup hits, not only search but also navigation and mobile. And so we have a broad reach. And ultimately, though, it's up to the publishers as to which data they list. There's a trust factor, there's a hierarchy I'm sure that they look at. And so what I would suggest is that, first and foremost, your company name, address, and phone, what we call your NAP, needs to be consistent. That is key. As you mentioned in the other example, when you have these bad listings out there, every publisher is, for the most part, web binding and crawling other sites. Businesses are getting indexed. So if you have a bad listing out there, it could be out there for quite some time. And so it's really important to not only make sure that your listing is consistent, but also that you keep it up to date. So that would be another best practice. Not only having consistent information, adding your enhanced content, but keeping it up to date and making sure that, if you're sending it to multiple sources, multiple aggregators, even the advertisements that you might be placing, that it's a consistent message. And what tends to happen is, you have folks that will put like a call tracking phone number and URL, and when that campaign ends, that number goes dead, the URL goes to a dead site. And so you just want to be cautious of those, because publishers will look for that. I know several of them that will bounce the information through their own call tracking known database or URL known database, and typically they'll use the standard local phone number and URL for the business.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's something that is that we utilize also here. It's just the foundation for the listings management program and helping address those accuracy and consistency issues. And you hit on it too, Joe, that the regular feeding of that information is absolutely critical. As that data continues to be mined and pulled in from multiple sources, you always got to be making sure you're providing on a regular basis the relevant, updated, accurate information for all of your business locations or for all of a client's business locations. And that's exactly what our job is here, is to make sure that that data is getting out there and distributed. The second point on this slide is manually verifying those listings. So Infogroup hits a ton of sources and gets all of that name, address, enhanced content information out there, but we also deal with some advertisers that may need to make some direct updates to a site. Let's use Google as the most obvious example. So they quickly want to update photos, or they want to swap out hours of operation. And so when you're dealing with sites that are really important, we take a two-pronged approach. One, we feed the information through all of the data aggregators like an Infogroup, but we also then go and manually verify the listing. That gives us some control over the data within the listing. It gives us the ability to update the content within those profile pages that we saw earlier. We can add photos, we can swap out hours. So we from our standpoint, know that the best way to achieve the highest accuracy rate is to utilize the data aggregators, but also take the time to go out and manually verify for those sites that are important, so that it's almost a secondary source of consistent, accurate data that you have control over. So two-pronged approach, getting your data fed to all of those online, mobile, and navigation sources through data aggregators like Infogroup, but then going directly to the source in certain instances for a Google, possibly a Bing, a Yelp, or even a YP.com, and manually taking control of that page because you are the business owner, and then being able to provide the content from that standpoint as well. And I'll even jump back to a site here where there's this link right here on this page, on the link on the right-hand side, that says personalize this business. You'll see it on every example probably that we've showed right here. Is this your business? So in addition to getting the information fed, there's opportunities for you to go out and claim those businesses, and that's what we do on behalf of our clients, is that two-pronged approach. Data aggregators and manually claiming those listings.
Yeah, manual claim listings is good. The one thing that I would recommend for that is, again, not only consistency, but that you keep it updated. I think Google came out with an article last month where they're now, that if you haven't updated your claim listing within like 9 months or something like that, that it's subject to change. And that might have always been their best practice, but I think they're just verbally telling people. And so for us, when I talk to my clients, I say, worst case, update it every quarter, best case, every month. Because we have a bulk update date stamp, and that goes to our publishers, our licensees, and so they know the last time that record was, and it doesn't even have to be an update. You could just be verifying that the information is still correct. That is very helpful to the publishers, and they look at that. And so if they're getting, again, data from several feeds, and they have probably a trust score as to which data is coming in that they trust the most, if it has the most current data set or date stamp, then that data is most likely going to be used. But again, right, it's up to the publisher.
Right, and that's absolutely best practice, and something that we did when that Google update came out was obviously inform our clients that have pages claimed that look, you're in a good spot, but you're absolutely right. If you think about Google, I mean, we've all done it, set up profile pages, maybe even on social sites, and then we never use them again, and the data just gets stale. Well, the same thing happens from a business standpoint, and if you have a Google accepting data from Infogroup that's time-stamped as being very recent, and then you have the fact that the site or the page was claimed by the business itself, but it's 2 years old, what is going to be the most likely source of the correct information? You're absolutely absolutely right that Google was going to unverify businesses that hadn't been updated within the last 6 to 9 months, and they have started that process, and I think have fully rolled that out. So very important that if you take the time to manually claim and verify a listing, that you're also updating it. So Joe, you touched on this, and I know we want to open it up to questions here. So the main selling points that we want to get across here today is your data's got to be relevant, it's got to be consistent, and it's got to be accurate. And Joe, at a high level, I wanted to show a couple of the good examples versus the bad examples from a business name standpoint. So the bottom right, you're looking at a Starbucks that's in a Target. And how that approach is not necessarily the best practice. What we'd rather see is them using that host business, correct?
Correct.
So, if you fall into this category, make sure we're not updating that business title. Make sure we're not adding additional language outside of the business name. Keep it to what the signage says. Keep it accurate. Keep it consistent for all your locations. Don't put the city names in that they service within the business title. It's only going to create more problems for you. Another consistency issue would be the phone number, and you touched on this, Joe, so I'll quickly just reiterate. The phone number needs to be consistent across the online space, and that even includes on your website. You want the location phone number on a website, like in this location, to match the phone number that you're feeding online. In this case, you see that the phone numbers are different. It may be because this number is a tracking number, and while you're trying to track the calls, you're creating a problem in terms of duplicate listings and issues online. So making sure that that phone data is consistent, not only across various sites, but on your own website as well. Anything to add on naming, Joe, or even phone number?
To save time, no, it's going to be consistent. I understand that, a company can have several phone numbers, but think of the publisher who you want to list your listing. They can only do so much. They can only put so much on the screen, and they're dealing with 100 million points of interest for records, and so metadata. So, we're trying to make it easier on them. But I understand from the SEO standpoint how they need to justify getting paid by the business, right? They need to show the traffic and whatnot. There could be different ways to do that versus changing anything on the NAP, especially.
Yep. Most important data, the name, address, and phone. And the final example here is just operating hours. In this case, keeping them consistent between the website. This location was actually a bank location that on the website had the hours correct, but listed it online as open from 9 a.m. to 5 a.m., which I'm sure is causing some issues with consumers. So it goes across every data field. Even the hours of operation need to be consistent, to your point, because publishers are trying to manage all of that data, and inconsistencies are only going to cause more issues and more inaccuracies.
So thanks to Michael and Joe for conducting today's webinar, and thanks to all of you for attending today. If you have any questions or would like to be connected with today's speaker, simply email us at webinars@thelsa.org. Also, for a look at what's coming and to access all of our past webinars, visit www.thelsa.org/webinars. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.